Episode 39 of the Geekdom101 podcast is another two-parter. This time it's part one with Andy Signore, the creator of Honest Trailers and several other shows over at Screenjunkies. Now he is the host of Popcorn Planet and Movie World. It's a two-parter because I like to chronicle it as being the rise and fall, even though Andy has risen once more. Basically, this first part, originally it aired on July 16, 2020, and Andy and I talked about making small movies. He's basically a small, young filmmaker in Pennsylvania winning some awards, and then he wound up going all the way over to California to work with Screenjunkies and really adding a lot of value and content to the YouTube space. But then he was canceled with a false Me Too movement and accused of things that he never even did. That's going to be more discussed in part two. Part one's going to be sort of the build up to that story and how we got to where we're at. It's a really fascinating story, and I think in the future I'm going to do more videos about cancel culture and Me Too and how it's gotten completely out of hand, but that's for later on down the road. In the meantime, check out this episode right now, part one of two with Andy on the Geekdom101 podcast. All right, I'm with Andy Signore here from Popcorn Planet. Formerly, he was a part of the Screenjunkies crew, but now he's rebuilding and kind of reincarnating himself here as a Popcorn Planet. And also, you have a new channel that should be up by the time this goes up, Movie World. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's right. First off, thanks for having me, man. It's always nice to talk, just have a nice talk with someone who actually wants to listen, have a conversation. Excited to be here, man. And yeah, I'm doing a new channel. It's called Movie World. I started Popcorn Planet when I came back, and I've been having trouble with the YouTube algorithm. Happy to talk about it if we go there, but sure, I'm trying to start over with a new channel that's strictly movie analysis. It's going to be like movie essays. I'm sure I'll get some copyright strikes and things, but it's just because I want to get into it more. I want to try and edit again instead of just commentate. And so it's called Movie World. You can find it from my channel. I'm still trying to build it up, but yeah, check it out. I'd love if people don't like me as much, but they like my analysis on movies, then it's like, great. You don't have to deal with me as much. You can just listen to cool takes on movies, and that's what that channel is going to be about.
Right. Well, that's good. I mean, it's good content is good content no matter where it's from. Now, I wanted to kind of go back here because, you've built some pretty big channels and some pretty big, I would say, important things when it comes to not just YouTube, but just sort of like the internet sphere. You and your comrades. Obviously, Screenjunkies is massive. I mean, it's a massive channel. Honest Trailers is like the biggest thing. You've kind of been in the game for, I want to say somewhere to the effect of, almost, has it been over a decade?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would say it's been over a decade. I got an MTV Movie Award at 2007 for a short film I did. And I would say that was like when things really started to pick up for me. So yeah, I mean, that's 13 years ago.
Would that have been Ocean's 11-year-olds?
That was United 300. Ocean's 11-year-old. That's a funny story, Ocean's 11-year-olds. That was free. That was a separate contest for a show it was like Steven Spielberg was doing a reality show for like finding the next great, independent filmmaker, like viral filmmaker. And so Ocean's 11-year-old, good job pulling the deep cut there, was a short film I made for that contest. And interestingly enough, I did that short to try and get in with Mark Burnett, who does Survivor, and he did The Apprentice, and I was a big fan of those reality shows. And then it was like Steven Spielberg, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I submitted this short for that project, and then I ultimately didn't get it. 'Cause I don't know why. I probably wasn't good enough, whatever the reasons, but I think I also was late or something happened, or they were looking for more. I don't know. They were clearly looking for like cast members, not more than filmmakers. And I was always really hurt by that. I was like, oh man, I didn't get that show. And then ironically, just crazy how the world works. Later that year, I ended up submitting for another contest for Yahoo's MTV Movie Award contest. And so here I got rejected by the On the Lot was what it was called. On the Lot. It was a show. And I was like, oh, damn, I didn't get on that cool show. That show ended up bombing. And then I ended up going on the MTV Movie Awards. And sure enough, that year was produced by Mark Burnett. And I ended up doing the short United 300, which was a parody of the movie 300 and United 93, which sounds like that would be in today's climate. I don't think I could have gotten away with it.
Never.
But back then, like, it was done respectfully, and like it was like, yeah, America, screw those terrorists. And we did that short, and then just the way world works, you lose one, then you gain the next. Where literally, I'm at the MTV Movie Awards live, and I'm in part of this little dumb contest, and Mark Burnett's like walking by repping the show, and he stops. He's like, "Which one did United 300?" He's like, and he ignores all the other contestants. He comes straight to me. He's like, "Don't fuck up my show."
I never knew that story.
He gives me like a handshake, and he's like, because at that point I was like, I guess I'm gonna win. And I won that night. Samuel Jackson like gave me like a popcorn. I have it behind me on my set. It was such a cool night. And that really was like, where suddenly all my I'd done several years of viral videos, as you would call them, but that one finally like put me on a new radar. It was like, now I was getting meetings. I was at UTA. I was like, all right, cool. I'm in this space. But it was amazing because I thought, and then it turned out that show that I was going for, on the lot, complete waste of time, completely went nowhere for everybody. And my spoof, which was just I was way more proud of and had fun with, ended up taking me in a whole nother stratosphere to get more jobs and everything, where I went. So lesson for everyone out there: never lose focus. Always keep submitting and keep trying.
Right, and that's been like a kind of metaphor for your life in many ways. You get knocked down, you get right back up. I want to go actually even further back. Then I want to talk about young Andy. So, as a kid, right, what kind of take me through the process of how you got into movies, as far as like, because everybody loves movies, but I mean like wanting to be in the movie sphere. Did you want to be a director, writer? Like, when you were a kid and you first like fell in love with movies, like a Tarantino, for example, or one of these kind of guys, what was it that like what was that journey? Did you just, is that what you wanted to do, is be a writer, director? Did you just love film? Like, how did that start?
I got into it in middle school. In middle school, we had a video camp. I was lucky enough to be in like a pretty, affluent neighborhood prep school. It was called Germantown Academy. Bradley Cooper was like a few years before me. And so I went to this school, and I wasn't great at the like liberal arts stuff. Like I was not great with my grades, but I was really excelling in the arts department, like photo, art, etc. And so they had this like up and coming video department. And this was back in like the early, like, I don't know, 94, 95. So way before YouTube and before, video was a thing. And so they had this like, video toaster type of stuff. And so I got into this summer camp where they were just trying to get kids to like make some extra money on the side. The school was just like, hey, we got this video department, let's get kids into it. And so there was a program the school had, but it was for seniors. So I did this camp program, and I loved it. I fell in love with it. I should show that movie. My first movie was called Satanic Callings. It's what I made that summer. It was like me getting possessed. It was me getting possessed by the devil in the camp, and I'm like awkward 13-year-old running around. I used like scores from like Born on the 4th of July and like all these amazing John Williams scores and stuff. But anyway, I did the film. It was, it was stupid, but it was fun. And then I did this. I came back the next year. We did the sequel, and I started realizing, oh man, I need to do this. So by the time middle school was over, I'd always would look forward to the summer to go make my movies, and I started making them on my own, like home videos. And so then because they saw like talent in me, luckily I was at a school where like the teachers noticed like, oh, this kid's like good at this. He actually cares. He's paying attention. They let me join the program as a freshman. And so it sort of changed the whole video program. And so I became a freshman, and then they let some of my other friend who I did it with, Jeff, the two of us did it together. We went and did it. And then that became my life in high school. I just became the video guy. And so I was making sure they had a video assembly at GA. That was like my favorite day of the year. And so all year we'd make these little shorts and videos and spoofs. That was what I loved to do, because I was a fan of like Weird Al Yankovic and stuff growing up. And so we'd work on these little spoofs. And so that was my audience. Once a year, at like the end of the school year, we'd have the video assembly. And so my year's work of making like my short or my sketch, my spoofs would be shown in front of the entire school. And so like I really enjoyed like having like it was like a live audience. And I made these little spoofs, and I made them laugh. And my favorite one I made a parody of ER at the time, called ARA, because like ARA Mark, it's what it's called now, is like the cafeteria staff that does like a lot of school cafeterias. Right. So I did like a parody of the ER opening, but with my cafeteria ladies. And so I shot it like in the blue grade and like did the fast cuts, and they gave me access behind, and I filmed all this like fun little shots of like, and Betty Quarles was like the most iconic lunch lady you can imagine, like her all annoyingly checking in the lunches and stuff. And so it's like a very little funny short that just everyone in the school was just dying when they saw it, because it was funny. Like, it was funny. I'm usually can tell like when something's funny, but I knew my audience, right? And that was a lesson I learned very early on of like, all right, how do I make these people laugh? You know what I mean? Like, I learned that really early on in my high school days of like, all right, well, I know this crowd. I know who they like. I know which teacher they like. I know what show they're watching. And so I very early learned in high school, I did that. And so every year I got better and better, and I became like known, like the teachers were like, oh my God, what's Andy going to do this year? And so I became like a very popular, not a popular kid by any stretch of the imagination, but I became known as like the video guy. And so people like, I was known, like people around the school knew of me based off that, and because of my personality and my videos. And so that was sort of my first touch of like, oh wow, movies can really like interest people, and you can get a reaction, and that's how I can sort of get noticed. And so that's really where it grew. So I made a short film that was really embarrassing called Omnibus, about life on a school bus. Like, so I did all these like really that submitted me to a contest in Florida, the National Foundation for the Advancement of Arts, where they flew me out to Miami, and I got to do this really cool thing where really my video work in high school started like getting me attention. And then I realized that's what I wanted to do. And so I carried through college, and then I decided to do some liberal arts schools. I'm giving you the long. I'm trying to shrink down, but
go for it, man. It's a great story.
Every time I went to school at college to like pursue it, like they didn't have any film programs. I went to a school because I was like, all right, so, and this is for anybody who's out there who has a kid, maybe like, I was like, how do I pursue this next? So I signed up for like this film school in Maine. That was like a unaccredited, just but like film program. It was called the Workshops at the time, and it was Rockport College, I think is what it is now. But I went there because I had this idea of like, oh, cool, it's going to be a smaller school, less worrying about the schoolwork and more about arts, right? That's what I wanted to do. And I did that, and I realized all my credits were for nothing. This is a waste of time. I didn't really love it. What I loved, though, is I was using the opportunity at school and my friends there to like shoot movies every day. I would literally just do like 24-hour movies where we're like, all right, let's go film today. And I would just film and edit in camera, right? Before I even got access to the Avid, I was shooting, right? So I learned like, just keep shooting. And then I went to Dickinson College because I was like, I should have the college experience. And I went to Dickinson College in Pennsylvania, and ironically started a group called the Flickheads, where I like, again, this is all pre-YouTube. I was like starting these like little channels and little groups to make movies. And so I just knew throughout my, most of my life, like, this is what I want to do. Right. And that Flickheads group, I did it for a year, and it was really fun. It was like, I sort of tried to echo what I did in high school, and we had a film assembly I started. And then ironically, I started, the people who joined that group after me were the Fine Brothers. Do you remember them? Kids React, and they became pretty big YouTubers.
Yeah, they were pretty big for a while, and they had that controversy a couple years ago, right?
But it was just funny because they were like inspired through my, film school at Dickinson. After I left, like, they came in and took over. So it was like weird that I was like, the thing I'd built like was inspiring others to be creative. And I loved that. I was like, this is so cool. And so anyway, I kept going and started making it myself. And then I moved to LA, finally did a school there that took my credits. And I decided to then YouTube started. And honestly, YouTube was kind of sucked because at the beginning it was kind of fun, but then it just opened up the floodgates if everybody could sort of do what I was really, so I felt like I was poised to be great at. And I realized, oh crap, now anybody can just do it and have access to it. Like, they don't even need the experience. Like, I was getting frustrated because I would want to do a spoof and somebody would already just post it, and they still do it. Like, spoof is dead now because some moron will just post their first attempt at it, and it's not actually funny or well done. And so that's sort of now become YouTube, of just anybody just throws up crap. And so I started doing YouTube, and that's where it all came from. I started trying to get creative. I started to keep doing my spoofs, and then really fast forward, I have a lot of other ups and downs throughout the way. That it was that contest through Yahoo on MTV Movie Awards that then really sort of got attention. So to ask the short answer, like, yeah, I was making stuff since I was like 12. When I was 12 through all the way past college, like, I made a point to always be shooting, like always take whatever access I had, like friends who were willing to shoot with me, locations that would let me shoot with them. I was always trying to just be creatively and shoot. And it's something that I'm like, I grew up doing, and then I lost focus of, which we can get to at some point. But I always, now I've told this, I've talked to some other people about sort of who've asked me, and when I go back and remember my history, I'm like, damn, I got to get back into that, because that was really when it was fun, right? When you do it for yourself and you're learning. And so it's just it's a experience I would advise everyone to do. Film school is great if you can shoot, right? If they let you film and you're networking with people who will be creative with you, then it's great. But if you're not filming or shooting or actually getting, experience writing stories and telling stories, then get the hell out of that film school and take the money you're spending on the film school and go make a movie, because you will learn way more making the movie than you'll ever learn in film school.
So was shooting the most enjoyable part, or was it writing, editing? What was the most enjoyable part about the whole process?
I wouldn't call I mean, I'm a writer by necessity. I don't consider myself a great writer. I'm a better idea guy. I'm a better idea guy and follow through. Like I know how to I know I mean, I don't say that to be cocky. I've had good luck and know, when I had good ideas. And this right now, the problem is even if you have a good idea, it doesn't matter because distribution is so hard right now. But, back when it was a little bit more easy, like I had just a good way of just getting things done. Like United 300 was an idea. Like a buddy of mine came up, we did it together. And when I was like, I'm running with it. And I made it happen. I found a plane. We had no money, a couple $100. I ended up finding like a plane set in Pacoima, California. And ended up giving the guy some weed, or gave the guy some weed to get it for cheaper access. Like I was like, I became known amongst my friends and people like, oh, Andy Andy will just go shoot it. Andy will get it done. Like he knows how to get it on and then get it online. So that's sort of more of what I liked. I like having the idea and then following through and making it happen. So it's a little bit of like a producing, directing, creation is really where I enjoy excelling. But writing is something you have to do. And so I became better at it, but I got better. I think my work got better when I was able to hire and work with actual writers to get and make writers' rooms. I just you make better work when you have a room of people to bounce ideas off of. Absolutely. But if you're asking me if I'm a writer, I mean, I do it because I have to. If that answer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what the most enjoyable thing is just coming up with ideas and following them through, right?
Yeah, I mean, coming up with ideas, spitballing, having fun, and that's the fun process for me.
So, you're not originally from LA. Where are you originally from?
So Philadelphia, born and raised.
Okay. Wow. Roots
Germantown,
area.
Fort Washington. Yeah, that's where I was hometown was Ambler. I don't have any family there anymore. Everyone's sort of moved from there. But yeah, my whole 18 years was out there in Ambler, which was a nice suburb to grow up in. I enjoyed it.
Were you and your family renting a lot of films at the video store, or were you going to movies? What was kind of young Andy's sort of gateway into loving movies? Was it renting, going to movies, or both?
It was my dad. He loved movies and he had a video collection, and so he was like a member of Columbia House back in the day.
Oh, is that the thing where you pay 50 cents, you get 10
exactly.
movies, but you have to buy a certain amount, right?
Exactly. I don't think it actually.
My dad was too.
I don't think it was the most cost-effective method, but it was one. And then we quickly that he did that before it was a thing. Like when VHS back in video, back then, videos were expensive. They were $100. Yeah, to get the new video, you paid $100 for it. It was ridiculous. And then Columbia House gave it to you for $30. And so he would get some movies, and then it just became a thing. And I would always organize it. We had a video wall, literally. He had a wall on the living room that was just all of our VHS copies. So anytime someone would come over, they'd be like, "Oh my God, you have a video store in your house!" This was before collecting was even a thing. DVDs made that, easier because it was cheap. They were cheaper, etc. But it was around the same time pre-owned videos. You'd go to it was before even Blockbuster, West Coast Video and Ambler Videos. And we had your local video store. They would sell them for $10. You could go get a used copy of the video. So I grew up I grew up literally next to a wall of movies, classics, new stuff. And so that's where it really did come from. I mean, my mom loved movies too. She was very artistic. But it was definitely my dad's love of that movie wall. And I think there was probably a little bit of trying to impress him and, follow down that path. But also I loved sitting there and watching movies. When I come home, I'd pick a movie, rewatch a movie. And it was always a blast. And he'd have the whole Star Trek collection all on video. It was only 2 episodes per tape. It was it's Twilight Zone. He had a bunch of cool stuff. And so once I get into it, I made a catalog alphabetizing the videos. And then as a kid, I would put the top shelf of here's this month's featured movies, as if there were people coming to our house, which there weren't. But I was just a nerd like that back then. But that's really where it came from. And then all through high school, I would just take my parents to the movies because no one would go. I didn't have a lot of friends in middle school. And through then I would literally every week I would have them take me to the movies. And then you just got used to it. They would just come along even until I was like 18 because I just didn't care. I wanted to go to the movies. And I would go all the time. Throughout the whole 90s, I was pretty much there every weekend. Sneak previews used to happen even back then of, I got to go. I would check the paper and figure out what's happening. So my love of movies was really the 90s is when it all really sunk in. I became massively obsessed with everything that came out, trying to catch up on old stuff. And then, that was it.
Yeah, I actually remember Columbia House too. So that's
Yep.
it's wild, man. So fast forward a little bit to United 300. So after you won the MTV Movie Award, the popcorn, is it safe to say that that's when that victory opened doors, and that's kind of how you were able to establish connections in the actual industry and the actual business back then?
Yes and no. I mean, my advice I've told people, it's like yes, I got opportunities from that meeting. Absolutely. There were a couple of things that happened from that meeting, but I didn't have a follow-up project. I didn't have like here's my movie. Oh, here's a really cool idea. I'd love to buy this property. I didn't have any of that prepared. I was still very green, they call it. And so I remember there was a producer who sort of attached herself to me pretty quickly. I don't want to name her, but she was very nice and, supportive. And I think she saw talent in me. And she ended up getting me she helped me more than my agent did, to be honest. I had a digital agent at UTA at the time, and they didn't really give me anything. They put me on because they saw, okay, well, he did something cool. And I was sort of on UTA just on their digital side. It didn't really mean anything at that time. This was like 2007. So I had it, but I needed to still make my own moves. And this woman actually got me some serious pilot meetings. I had a couple cool ideas that I put out there, and there was a movie. She helped guys, and I had a movie I tried to write. It was basically a high school musical parody movie, but it was like an R-rated high school musical. And we wrote a good chunk of it. A buddy of mine we wrote a couple songs. We had the full outline. We had a pretty good script. It was pretty funny even. And I had some interest, and the people were like, "Oh, interesting. All right, cool." And then Bo Burnham was working on one with Judd Apatow, and so once people figured that out, they didn't care about me. They're like, "Oh no, Judd's already working on one, so never mind." So like all the work I did was for nothing. No one would even take meetings. So so it was like yes and no is the answer to that, because I got like a quick spike, but you gotta sort of be ready if you ever get a spike to have three things in your pocket ready to pitch. Is how they don't care about what you just did. They want to know what's next. And so I wasn't prepared for that, and it slowed my ramp up. So I just went and sort of made some of my own networking, and that's when I got a job. At that time, I got a job at it was called The Collective, and they became CDS, which is now Studio 71, I think they are. But they were like a comedian agency. And so they repped like a bunch of comedians like Cat Williams and Kevin Nealon, Gary Shandling. They had a bunch of comedians in there. And then they had a bunch of musicians like Linkin Park, Enrique Iglesias. So it was a pretty good management firm. But the music management is no longer there. I was there right as they were sort of learning digital. And so this is the company that made the Fred movie. If you remember Fred, it's Fred on YouTube.
It's Fred,
yep.
Yes.
And then Annoying Orange, like this was back. So I knew Dane, the Annoying Orange. I got him hooked up with that. And I was shooting Fred videos. So I was sort of riding this digital wave over there at the Collective as it was growing. And I was helping them get some cool wins there. And then as I was doing that, I got poached and got a job at Disney. And so I basically got poached. All of my major jobs were like, basically I was poached from one to the other. And so I got poached and went to Disney, and I worked there for about 2 months because I thought, well, crap, I'm going to go work at Disney. Of course, it was better pay. It was everything. And I lasted a month. I was like, this is the worst. And I could just tell like they created a digital department, and I was bringing in serious talent. Like I wish someone there had been paying attention to it, because we could have crushed it. I was bringing like Freddie W before he was Freddie W. Like he was going to do a Tron bike thing. Like some really cool stuff, and my boss had no idea what he was doing, and that didn't want to make any moves. And then the departments at Disney didn't want to do anything, so it was a very frustrating experience. And so I started making content on the side, and started doing a YouTube channel at the time, Secret Sauce TV, which is what I ended up repurposing into Popcorn Planet. But I made a short I made another short called Twilight for Guys. And so that was like back when YouTube was like all about sexy videos. Like they wanted, that's what sold in YouTube back then. So I made this sexy video called Twilight for Guys, and it was basically a parody of Twilight, but like what if guys were into it? So it was just like lesbian vampires, and it was like, because Twilight the movie was just, it was porn for girls in a way. And so I thought, let's like show guys why they're liking it. And so it was a pretty funny, I liked it. It got these comedians to like be outside of a theater, be like, oh my God, I love Twilight, Bella, I can't believe Bella was so into it. And it was just a cut in between these like sort of fake porn scenes. Anyway, it did huge. And then I was attracted by break.com at the time. They were called Break Media. And so while I was working at Disney and getting frustrated, nothing was happening, I made this like completely un-Disney video that ended up getting a lot of attention, and then got noticed by the people at Break, and they reached out and they're like, well, how would you like to be our head of video? And so that's when I went to the next step, which was joining Break Media, which ultimately became Defy Media, which is ultimately where I, made up Honest Trailers and everything. And that, the rest was history.
Well, I want to get into that. So, okay, so you were at Disney, but you were miserable because you felt like they weren't listening to you?
I was miserable. Well, it's a very steady and safe job. But I just could tell they didn't know what they were doing. And I don't mean to throw shade at this guy, but he was kind of an idiot. He was just he thought he knew what he was doing, but he didn't want to make any big moves. And this was, at Disney, they don't really want you to make big moves either. And so, everyone sort of plays it safe there. And then you got to work through the franchise department, the legal department, and the branding department. There's like 100 departments over there.
It's a corporation.
Yeah, it just slows everything down. And so, I got it. I'm not even trying to knock it, but I'm knocking him a little bit because he did mess up, and he could have done way better, and he just didn't know what he was doing. And then you add to that a boss who doesn't know what he's doing, and you're stuck there. But then you add to like all the corporate structure, and you realize, man, this is going to be miserable. Like I can't make anything. Like I'm bringing in really talented people, and they'd rather spend money on like a stupid thing that I know no one's going to ever see, versus like invest in this thing that's going to actually put them on the map digitally. And it was just frustrating, So when I got the opportunity and got poached by Defy, again, lesson everybody, always say you're making more than you are. And then I got more money, and I got an exciting opportunity to go, work for them. I took it because I was just like, I can't. And it was the wise move. That department, I think, got shut down like 6 months later because Disney realized, what are you guys doing? What is this department?
Wow.
And then I think they ended up getting a YouTube group. I forget what it was called. There was a whole bunch of drama that happened all around those times. But yeah, it was frustrating. I wanted to enjoy it more. I liked Disney. Like it was fun to go to Burbank and work there. Really talented people, like awesome benefits, like summer Fridays. Like it was a cool. I wish I could have just probably tapered down and slowed down. I could have had probably a nice livelihood working the corporate Disney ladder, but I couldn't. I wanted to make stuff. I didn't want to just sit back and do nothing.
Well, how did Screenjunkies begin? Because according to, I think it was 2012, because the earliest thing that I remember from Screenjunkies, and I could be wrong, was Disney's Looper. Was that the first thing y'all did, or was it something else? How did that start?
I think the first one there was something before that. I mean,
it's been years.
Screenjunkies was a website that they owned. It was like sort of a more irreverent, like edgy, like this tagline was like, we like to watch. Like it was coming from like the Spike TV era, like break.com. If you remember, anybody remembers that, Yep. It's now over there, but it was dude content is what it was. And so I was coming off of YouTube dude content, which was successful, to like suddenly this dude site. And so most of their brands were all sort of dude related. Couch Potato, or what was it? Cage Potato, I think it was. Like
Cage Potato, yep.
There were a bunch of these sites that they owned at the time that, were just like, it was all for guys. And so Screenjunkies was sort of like the guys for, movie channel for guys. That's really where it came from. And so, that was the thing I had to work into and work. So I wanted to just make, cooler content there. But we were sort of taught, as I came in to work for content, I started making content for Break. So I did some spoofs that were pretty successful. We launched a channel that doesn't exist anymore, which makes me so livid. They shut it. It was called the Break Originals channel. We made a lot of fun work there, and they just shut it down to do a brand takeover for another thing to sort of trick brands. It was so frustrating. But I made all these spoofs that, millions of views that just got shut off because they wanted to make more money selling a brand deal. But I made all this content for this channel that, we were trying to make like a college humor type sketch channel, but I had no resources, no budgets. And my bosses didn't know what they were doing either. And it was just a frustrating environment. And so, but I was getting hits. I was making stuff that was tracking. Like I would release a video and we'd get a good amount of views, so they could sort of tell early on, like, all right, he knows what he's doing. He knows how to he has his finger on the pulse of the internet in a way, and he's like making good ideas and he's following through and et cetera. So I sort of walked through the Break world, and then I went through several versions of managers, people ahead of me who were sort of in charge of what I eventually got to do. And then even when I got to do it, there was still always someone above me who was an idiot. But the point of the matter was, like,
so even Break was kind of corporate and like not as bad as Disney, but you're making it seem like Break has similar problems.
Well, everyone has bad bosses. I'm sure some would say I was a bad boss. You know, it just depends on how with the experience of the reason I would say they had bad bosses is because they didn't have any successes. They didn't know what they were doing. They were not creative. They were not creative enough to excel, but they thought they were. And at least for me, like, I had work that was, that spoke for me. It didn't matter whether that's why it's like people would say I had an ego or I was a jerk, but it's like, well, I had experience. I had made work on my own that was successful. I got awards. I have views on under my belt. Like, that's experience, right? And so when you go work for somebody who doesn't have that same experience, I think my one boss at the time was good editorially. Like, he made some cool. He was an author writer, and he wasn't an idiot. It was just frustrating because he was trying to make a name for himself.
He had a different skill set, is what you're trying to say.
Yeah, right? I think he thought he was the creative, right? And so you're just jockeying with fellow bosses who are creative, and it's always a tough sell. And I wasn't always even great on it when I became a boss. But my point was, like, it was just hard. And then there was another woman who worked there who was just the devil, who just she wanted. And it was tough. I'll be fair to her credit. She was a woman in a dude's environment. Like, she just had it. It was so hard for her to excel there. And but at the same time, she was just everyone hated her. She was such a miserable person. And both of those people who were like my bosses were like would throw anyone under the bus to succeed in the environment. Right. And so that was sort of what I mean by, like, it was just very competitive. And so I'm constantly, like, there were a lot of nights where I just go home oh my God, I'm going to get fired. What's going on? There was so much stress and frustration to try and, like, move mountains to get them hits. And so, it was frustrating. And so finally, after a couple of years of that, like, finally I started getting a little bit more footing to see, okay, clearly I'm the one I've made content that's succeeding. It doesn't always all succeed, but my track record is pretty good. Right. And so that's sort of how I got known around the company, and people would sort of look up and say, oh, what does Andy think? And then, that probably gave me that. I mean, not probably, it did give me a bit of a big head, and that ultimately was part of my demise as too. But I was, trying to strive in an environment that you had to be cutthroat or you lost. You weren't going to excel if you weren't, being more dominating and, like, trying to get your name out there. And that was the sort of structure that was created there, right? And it was also a dude's, environment there. And so anyway, long story short, so I was doing stuff for Break. We did a bunch of pranks. I was shooting them for nothing. I was out there, like, breaking my neck, trying to make these, and I made some pretty funny pranks over the years. And then finally, in success, like, was able to hire producers to help me, and that was amazing to finally create something, but then hand it over and then oversee it from afar. I was like, oh, I like this job way better, because I can get involved and do when I want to do it, but then when, like, the stuff I don't want to do, I can let them go do it and find their own way. So anyway, but once that happened, I sort of, we got it. My boss was fired. The two people I hated, they were fired finally. And that was like, I was like, whoa, thank God. And so there was, like, cleaning of shop, and they brought in a new guy, and then they kept me and sort of elevated me a bit, but then kept this new boss. And so that was during that second period of sort of, changing the Break world, that's when I was sort of tasked. No, sorry, I correct. I'm remembering. They brought in a showrunner from another show. I don't want to say his name because I'm not trying to. But you're asking me a history, so I'm giving you my full history.
No, that's fair, man. You don't have to say any names if you don't want to. It's all good.
They brought in this guy who was a showrunner who has said I've seen, and people have shown me he's tried to take credit for Honest Trailers, and he's just lying. He was brought in as sort of our boss, and so there was, like, a writer's room. It was me and some other people. We were sort of the creatives that made it through the firings. And so they hired this guy because they didn't think we could do it. They hired this guy who they thought could do it. And it was so wrong because this guy only cared about his scripts. Like, he was literally there to get a quick paycheck, and he was out there in pilot season, like, trying to make his deal. He had no interest in being the head of Break. Like, this guy was not invested in it at all. Like, he had an agent. He was taking calls in the writer's room all the time talking about it, but he would, like, sort of pretend to be interested in this job. And so we were all very frustrated with him because we're like, why are we listening to this? He doesn't care, right? Why is he here? But, he did it because he had a couple writing credits, and they thought, oh, he'll be good to work the room. And, he then was tasked by the boss to then go make content for their websites. And so that's when Screenjunkies.com suddenly came into the opportunity. Like, all right, guys, figure out how to make content for Screenjunkies.com. We want to make a YouTube channel. Let's figure out some shows for it and go from there. And so this guy wanted to do a show. I believe he called it Your Movie Sucks. So he wanted to do a show called Your Movie Sucks, which, by the way, exists. He wasn't even like an original idea. And I hated it. I was like, oh, this is just so stupid. It's been done. And I was pushing against it so hard that I didn't want to do it. And so then finally, as I realized, okay, I got to do something. And I was like, at least let me change the format and redo it so it's something more interesting. And so in doing that sort of exercise of, which is what I was good at, of like figuring out, how do I do this better? How do I make fun of movies better? I was like, well, what if we did like an essay from, with like a trailer voice? And that was sort of came from this idea of like back in the day, David Letterman used to do late night, and he brought in Barry White. And it was like, things that sound funnier said by Barry White. And I always remember that as jazzercise. He said it with his deep voice. Right. And so I thought, well, I like a trailer voice. And we did like and then as I said it, I was like, oh, cool. And then it could become a trailer. And then we went and then I went and recorded it with a guy. We found somebody who had a similar voice. He was not the voice, but someone recommended a voice. He came in, and as I was recording it, I was like, oh, this is funny. We were doing the Phantom Menace, and I was like, oh man, this is funny. When he's doing his epic voice and he's talking about all the boring things in the movie, like I realized that's the joke. Oh, this is really funny. And I went back. My colleague at the time, Brett, was who helped me make Honest Trailers. I was like, I need more of the boring. As I was recording, I literally was rushing back to the room like, guys, we need more of like the boring stuff from the movie. So let's build a list. What is it? Council meetings, more council meetings, sitting. And then I run back and sort of, had him sitting, council meeting. And suddenly as I was recording with him, we both sort of realized, oh, there's something really funny here. And even he admitted, but I'm not your voice. He's like, you got to get a better voice than me. So anyway, that's what happened. That's how Honest Trailers was born. It was like literally on a one-off like joke. That was directed to me like, go make this thing called Your Movie Sucks. And I refused to just go do it. We wrote some scripts for it, but I refused to just do like a negative essay about why movies sucked. I thought that was uncreative. It wasn't fun. And that was his idea. And then it was me in the room saying, no, what if we get the trailer voice? What if we do it in a format like that? And then really while we recorded it, finding that sort of format. And then it was another colleague of mine, Alex, sort of helped with the starring jokes like shovel face and stuff for Twilight. And the show was born. And then we didn't think it was going to be a series, but then I sort of thought, let's try it again. And it wasn't until we did Dark Knight, which everyone in the room was like, you can't do. I was like, let me try, because I don't like it as much as everyone else did. I mean, I like it, but I was like, there are problems with it. Right. And then once we cracked the Dark Knight, I was like, and fans like allowed us to do that one and rib it a bit. I realized, okay, we have a show now. And then I think that's when everyone sort of noticed. But two quick facts just to tell you, like that show was only popular because I knew someone at 9gag. I knew like the head of 9gag. Remember 9gag.com? I think it's still out there.
I actually don't even know about it. I didn't know about the website.
It's not 4chan, but it was just an aggregator of sort of memes and stuff. And so because of my past, making viral videos, which I'd done for years prior, I had built a Rolodex of like editors and people at sites that, knew my work and like actually looked at my emails, And so when I shared the first few Honest Trailers, he promoted them on 9gag and he embedded it because he was being nice. And that's how we got like almost 1 million views each time. And because we got those 1 million views each time, the algorithm picked them up, and suddenly everyone started wanting more, and it took off. So it was not knowing the guy and his help, Ray over at 9gag, for promoting it he was the sort of the secret hero of that show, because I'm sure it still could have taken off, but it might have been harder if we hadn't have found like a distribution outlet that put it out there the first time. But anyway, sorry, I'm going off. That's how Honest Trailers was built. And before that, there were a couple junket things we had tried. We had done some junket stuff on videos, and I remember Flula was somebody I loved. He's an actor now. He's in the Suicide Squad. But Flula, I sent him to a junket to do sort of a rap at a junket. Those were sort of the stuff that we were playing with before we cracked Honest Trailers. And then once we cracked Honest Trailers, like that, then we over time I realized, okay, that's when I sort of took over and figured out, okay, we need to do a Screen Junkie show so they know who we are. And then eventually movie fights. Let's get on there and debate. That was something I always wanted to do. And that's when sort of Screen Junkies really found its voice and footing.
So, okay, Honest Trailers was your first sort of big success when you had moved over to Screen Junkies, right? When they moved you, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd done viral video hits
right.
At Break.
Break.
Yeah, But that was definitely the best. Like a new series that was getting 1 million views every week. Suddenly, we were like, "Oh, damn, this is a behemoth." Yeah, that was the first thing for Screen Junkies.
Did you think that was too much too soon for you looking back now?
No, I think, and I slowed it down. They wanted to do honest everything, and I was very against it. And to the, they
You didn't want to play it out.
Yeah, I didn't want to play it out. When Honest Trailer started, it was once a month, and then eventually it became like every other week, and then eventually we agreed to weekly. But we didn't want to run it into the ground. We wanted to make sure it was worthy, and we were having events with it, and so weekly was sort of what we always agreed was like the most you could do it. But then there was, let's do honest ads and let's do honest music. Like, they wanted to do honest everything, and I was like, oh, come on, let's not run into the ground just now. But that was always a fight we had of just figuring out how do we keep it cool? How do we keep it punk rock?
So it was you and like a team of writers was it like a rotating team of writers, or did you have like a core group of guys that would always be good there?
It was me and Brett Weiner. Brett Weiner helped me do it. I made sure he had credit when the credits, it was always, created by me and him. While it was my idea, he was instrumental in those first episodes, like finding its voice and its format. And then there was a writer early on, Alex Sargent. We don't like each other, and he doesn't like me anymore. But I always give him credit because he was very funny, and he came up with a bunch of really funny jokes to help find that sort of tone as well. It was a little bit more mean spirited back then. But that was sort of the core team in the beginning. And then we found Gannon Nickel, who was our original voice. He's the only one of that whole team who's cool with me now. So props to Gannon for being a good dude. And Gannon was the original voice. And then we had a couple writers at the time that we had some falling outs with them because it was a frustrating time. But there were some writers there who I liked, who were doing pretty good. And then one of them left. He was going to get fired anyway, and then another one got a job at Conan, and he left. And it was sort of those early days of during bossing. It wasn't the best, easiest time because I wasn't really the boss. I had a boss, and a lot of people thought, like, oh, well, why is Andy doing it? I should be doing. There was a little bit of dissent there of just like trying to keep that ship moving, and so it was always traditionally me and Brett trying to own it all. And so it's like because we were like, we knew how to do it and we were moving forward. So there were a few other writers that were coming in and out that didn't like notes, is what I'm getting at, right? They didn't want to get notes. They were frustrated by the note process from Brett and I. And so eventually through a few, there were some writers in the beginning and throughout. It wasn't until we hired Spencer, which was, I think, 30 or so in. I forget the amount, I'm guessing. Spencer then came in and became our sort of main writer. And then Dan who was editing them, started then coming in to be the writer as well. So that's when the core team of like me, Spencer, and Dan, and then Brett left. Me, Spencer, and Dan became sort of the real then team who started then doing the bulk of them throughout, after 25, 30, they all became that. And that's also around the same time we got John Bailey, who became the epic voice.
Yes, that's the voice that we know.
And there were periods where, there were some writers who came in and out, and we would freelance some writers. We were always trying to find some new writers. We always credited them. But there were some writers that came in and out, sort of seeing could they do it? Did they get the it's not sarcastic trailers. There was a format and a treatment to it, and we wanted to make sure they understood, and it didn't take them too long to write it because we had to work under deadlines, And we all sort of had a filter. We wanted to make sure it hit what we thought was an honest trailer, or at least what I did. And then eventually Spencer got to that point where then Spencer sort of took over a lot of it. And then I sort of would oversee and come in and chime in and offer notes and still add some stuff. But then he eventually became sort of that. So the show had many different versions.
So the Screen Junkies show, you started in 2012, and then that sort of became like the I guess the commentary show, the just discussion show. And then how did the process behind movie fights, like where did that idea was it like a spin-off of the Screen Junkies show?
So Screen Junkies show is just an opportunity to show them us and to have like a person, because Honest Trailers is doing so well. I wanted to make sure we could have an opportunity to just talk about anything movie related, right? You take advantage of junkets, whatever. And we wanted to find someone funny, and we committed to Hal. And so then that happened, that worked. We had some ups and downs, some big hits and some, whatever. Every week was a struggle of what's our show this week? What are we going to do? And then eventually, it was fine. We got our rhythm. And then it came down. Movie Fights was actually born out of YouTube because we had some commitment to the YouTube to give them a certain amount of hours. Like they took some money deal from YouTube, and in doing so back then they had to like fulfill 40 hours of content or something.
Oh,
and
so
we
wait,
were,
so you're saying that Screen Junkies had a specialized deal with YouTube?
yeah, a lot of channels
Okay.
did. This wasn't just a lot of big
Right.
partners at the time like made deals with YouTube, and like, you know, YouTube gave them extra money to like fund them to, you know, but they wanted more hours. That was a back then, you know, 2000 whatever 14 15 whatever it was, that was a deal that went across a lot of big YouTubers. And so it was sort of a thing where like, oh crap, we have to fulfill our hours because we promised YouTube a certain amount of hours this year and they gave us a little bit of change. And so that's when we realized, well, crap, we need to do it. And that's when I sort of went, well, I've been wanting to do a podcast. I wanted to do like a debate podcast. It's something I'd done as a kid, called Who's the Best, where I would always bring out these characters. And so I wanted to bring out sort of a movie debate format where I could host and like sort of judge, like arguing about movies, like do really an ESPN sort of thing of just like bringing in experts and just having us argue. And I thought it'd be even funner to have us there because that's what we did in the office all day. And so that was when it was born. And so, and then Dan got involved and he wanted to be like the Robin, and it's sort of from like Howard Stern. And I was like, well, yeah. And then he then got the fact checker, but then I realized he should fight too. And it just was an opportunity for us to all be there. We found a studio. The Schmozno team at the time had this deal with AfterBuzz TV, which was Maria Menounos's company. They had like a studio in the Valley, and we basically got to do it for nothing. We got them to give us our studio for credit, and we just did that show for nothing. We would just show up for an hour, talk, and then we tried it, and we thought it would just be like a 10-episode experiment, and quickly realized, well, no, the fans actually like this, and the fans were liking it sometimes more than the Screen Junkies show, because it became like, you know, appointment TV of what's the debate, who are the fighters this week, et cera, et cetera. And then eventually over time we got like Seth Rogen showed up, and Kumail Nanjiani, and, you know, Ed Helm, what's his name? Spacing his name, Rob Corddry. We had a bunch of, you know, Kevin Smith, Elijah Wood. We started getting like people, like movie fans, celebrities coming in, and so that's where Movie Fights was born.
Do you feel like now looking back, I mean, okay, as this was going on, this would have been like 2015, 16, 17, right around then, you know, did you feel like, I mean, obviously at the time, as you were creating this content, I'm going to assume, now I don't know for sure, but and you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but I'm going to assume that Defy, who owned all of this, if they owned Break and Screen Junkies, that they were giving you raises and you were making pretty good money from creating all this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, they paid pretty well. They paid me pretty well. I mean, I knew what everyone's getting paid, and they paid me pretty well. And I made sure the others got paid well, you know? I remember, like, I was coming from higher paid jobs, right? I was coming from higher paid jobs, and I had experience. So I got to start at a higher salary than a lot of the other ones because of that reason. And that's why I was exclusive to them. That's why I was giving them content ideas, because I was like, well, you know, I never thought I was going to lose it all. You know, I never thought in a million years that, you know, I was going to, in hindsight, yeah, it depresses me no end that I have no stake or control in any of it. All the stuff I did, sure, I got paid, but man, it doesn't, you know, to have Honest Trailers, it wouldn't have mattered if my name was on it or not. I could have still made a lot of money and made a living, any of that stuff I built. So yeah, I mean, it's frustrating in hindsight, but I never would have thought in a million years I would have been pushed out and lost everything, granted on what happened, you know? So when I did it all, I thought, well, yeah, they're paying me and I'll be able to use my name there to, you know, jump ship to another brand or another company. And I was fine with that. There was a big celebrity I was on before I signed on for a 3-year deal with Defy. I was about to leave, and then I signed on to look into Screen Junkies Plus, which was our paid service. There was another employer of mine came to me with an offer with a very big celebrity to sort of oversee their digital imprint, and I seriously considered it. But I thought, you know what, I want to see this through. This is an opportunity. That one's not guaranteed. We'll see. But, you know, there's so many what ifs that could have happened. But that my plan was always like, well, all right, I'll do it a few more years, and then I'll even have more status, and then I'll just jump ship to one of these celebrities I'm working with and trying to make content for them. And that was what my path was going to be. But then everything didn't go that way.
Right. We're going to talk about that here in a second. But I mean, you know,
that's such a perfect time to stop for part 2, don't you think?
Sure, we can do that. Yeah, all right. Well, we will stop now then, and then when we come back,
a clean break, right?
No, it's a perfect.
And it all went to shit.
And then it all went to shit. Well, I mean, the last thing I want to ask you for part one here is, looking back, I mean, the Honest Trailers, it has continued. Obviously, it's still very popular. They have different writers now. You're not there anymore, And obviously, I know you feel a certain type of way about that because it was your creation and it's still kind of there. But I mean, at the end of the day, do you see that as, are you proud that that's part of your legacy? Are you happy that it's gotten so big? What are your overall thoughts on your body of work up until this point? Not just with Honest Trailers, but even stuff before that.
Yeah, no, I'm super proud of it. I think there's a version that's like people, I don't think they want me to associate myself with it, and I think I refuse to have them erase me from their history. They tried to do that and I won't let them. They can, that's mine. That was my show. It was our show. Let me clarify. It was our show. I'm not going to take that away. Like, I'm very proud of that work. I don't know what they're doing now. I don't watch anymore, but yeah, I'm not going to let that not be. It was a big part of my history. I'm proud of it. I mean, dude, the Russo brothers, said the Honest Trailer proofed Captain America Winter Soldier. Like, that is cool. I'm not going to just pretend like that didn't happen. And, that's due to me. It's part of me, and just because I made some mistakes later doesn't mean I didn't do a lot of cool stuff that inspired and made people laugh. So of course I'm going to own it. That took some therapy and time to come to that place. But yeah, I mean, the one you didn't mention, I'm really still proud of, and I'm still good with those guys, is Man at Arms. It's another show that I think a lot of geeks don't even realize I created and had a huge part of, which is it's a blacksmithing show where we make like video game weapons and, web swords for movies. And
oh,
TV.
That was yours? I actually didn't know.
So that whole All Me channel was my doing as well. And so, that was another one where it was just like another reason why Defy kept me around, and was proud of me, because it wasn't just Screenjunkies. Like, I oversaw the All Me channel and made massive hits with that show and others. And so Man at Arms is one I'm still so proud of. I was just showing that one to my kids today because they're YouTubers and I can't. They don't know what happened, but they know I don't work for Screenjunkies. But I have to be careful what they see on YouTube. But it was so fun to be able to show them Man at Arms, because there's a couple where I'm in it. They're like, "Oh my God, you were there! Oh my God, that's you!" So of course I'm going to own that. Why not? That was stuff I'm proud of and made. So yeah, I mean, even the Defy stuff, I'm not going to ignore it. I'm going to own it. I have to own it, because that's I got to live with the bad. I might as well live with the good too, right?
For sure. And I mean, you don't have to say this, but I'll say it. I do think that, in my opinion, for a show to be that successful, I mean, Honest Trailers was how I even found Screenjunkies. I didn't even know what the hell Screenjunkies was until I saw Honest Trailers. It wasn't, I mean, I hadn't known what Break was, but Honest Trailers is how I got to know what Screenjunkies was. So I think you should get royalties. Just my opinion. You don't have to say it. I think you should, just because of how big it is. If it was like something that was doing decently okay, that's fine. But I feel like that series contributed so much to the overall brand that it's almost like, it's almost like the story, and I told you this before, how Steve Jobs got booted out of Apple. Like, yeah, I mean, it was him and Wozniak, and there's different corporate entities involved, but this is Steve Jobs here. You know what I mean? It's a smaller scale than him, obviously, but you get where I'm coming from, right? Like, I feel like it's so big and so important that I think in the history of YouTube, it's going to be right there with the Angry Video Game Nerd and guys like that. Like, I feel it's on that level. I really do feel that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I wish I'd just done it on my own. In hindsight, you have a good idea. You're like, well, man, this could be a really repeatable, fun thing. Especially back then. CinemaSins did it right. We were so always competed with them, but they weren't in the corporate structure. They didn't have to sell it off, and they owned it. Those two owned it. And so, that's what happened. And if I had owned Honest Trailers and that channel, it would have been interesting what happened. I probably would have had to stop the show for a while, and maybe that would have killed it. But, the show could have gone on without me and still without people knowing and the truth is, some people would have still watched it. Right. So that's the frustrating thing when you don't own it and you don't have that stake in anything in it. It's frustrating. It's frustrating. And then it's even more frustrating when they all just sort of throw you under the bus and try to erase your history of it and label you a certain way, and then keep doing it and not see sort of the hypocrisy and grossness of just continuing to do it without ever attempting to acknowledge or thank or anything. It's frustrating, but we can tackle that in part 2.
We are going to part 2 now, but anyways, all right, that's gonna do it for part 1. Part 2, check it out next week. We'll talk to you then.